And now it's my pleasure to introduce our commencement speaker. I'm truly honored today to present to you this teacher, scholar, musician, and former Chancellor James Moeser. James Moeser is Chancellor Emeritus of the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, Professor of Music, and Senior Consultant for Special Initiatives at the UNC Institute for Arts and Humanities. As Carolina's Chancellor from 2000 to 2008, he articulated the vision that UNC should be America's leading public university, and he provided the leadership to make that vision a reality. Chancellor Moeser received his undergraduate degree in organ performance with honors at the University of Texas. He obtained a master's degree in musicology from the University of Texas and a Doctor of Musical Arts degree from the University of Michigan. At the age of 27, he was appointed to the faculty of the University of Kansas as the chair of the Department of Organ. Over the next 20 years, he built a reputation as one of the nation's leading recitalists, church musicians, and teachers. His career in administration included serving as Dean of the University of Kansas School of Fine Arts, Dean of the College of Arts and Architecture at Penn State University, and Provost of the University of South Carolina. He was appointed Chancellor of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln in 1996 before being named Chancellor at Carolina in 2000. At Carolina, Chancellor Moeser championed academic freedom, defending the university from attacks against books chosen for the first-year reading assignment. In 2003, the Carolina Covenant, a program to provide debt-free education to students from low-income families, became a national model. Under his leadership, the $2.4 billion Carolina First campaign created 208 new endowed professorships and 1,350 scholarships and fellowships. He also reinvigorated the Carolina Performing Arts Program and oversaw construction of, among other things, Hyde Hall to house the university's Institute for the Arts and Humanities, a keystone to faculty development and enrichment on campus. This is but a small sample of the innovations that Chancellor Moeser provoked and encouraged. So now it's my pleasure to present a true visionary leader and educator, Chancellor Emeritus James Moeser, as our 2012 commencement speaker.
Thank you, Dean McDermott, members of the faculty, graduates, and parents. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you on this wonderful occasion. Commencement is the very, very best time on this campus, on any campus, but it's especially beautiful here. I was driving across campus yesterday a couple of times, and every time I went across the campus, there were a line of undergraduates in their blue gowns getting photographs with their families made at the old well. It's a ritual. They're probably taking their last sip of water out of that well, which for good luck. One of my favorite memories, actually, a few years ago, I was doing the same thing, watching our graduates, and I came across, and I kid you not, a Duke graduate with his parents getting his picture made in front of the old well. They're not all stupid. I love the fact that we have these individual school and departmental ceremonies all across the campus, in addition to the big official conferral of degrees in the stadium tomorrow. And I'm convinced of one thing, absolutely. There is no more important ceremony taking place anywhere on this campus than this one in this room today, because of your commitment to teaching and learning. Henry Adams said it best: a teacher affects eternity. She can never tell where her influence stops. My life was shaped by teachers whose memory is as alive to me today as if I were in their classrooms just yesterday. Chief among these influences was my was my own mother, who was a junior high school music teacher. And after school, she taught voice lessons in our living room. I can remember my first grade teacher, Mrs. Jatan. I remember my sixth grade teacher, Dimple Watson, who discovered that I had a talent for playing the piano. And I remember my piano teacher, Cecil Meskimen, who taught me about self-discipline. And I remember my senior high school English teacher, Nell Marie Wiley, who taught me well enough to write that I quizzed out a freshman English at the University of Texas. And I remember Hans T. David, a distinguished professor of musicology at Michigan, who taught me that the only models that one needs to write well in the English language are the King James Bible and the New Yorker. And I remember my major professor at the University of Texas, both my organ instructor and the dean of the College of Fine Arts, who became a life model for me as a musician, as a faculty member, and as an administrator. As you heard, my background is in the arts. And over the course of time, I gradually became more and more involved in administration. I really had, as you could hear from that resume, difficulty holding a job. From the experience and benefit of hindsight, I now realize that those great teachers so affected my early development that they were also supported by a great cast of professionals, school professionals, the counselors, the administrators, the school psychologists, whose practices were in turn grounded in scholarship carried out by educational researchers, some of the greatest of whom we have here in the UNC School of Education, a great site for education research. These were the invisible chorus who made my public school experience in Texas so valuable. Today, we are launching new careers across a full spectrum of educational professionals, committed to providing that kind of personal growth and development in students. But I must say the true pinnacle of my career and the best part of my life really has been the 8 years that I spent as Chancellor of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. It was truly a pinnacle. It was a view from the top. Now that reminds me actually of a story. A man in a hot air balloon realized that he was lost. He reached altitude and spotted a woman down below. "Excuse me," he shouted, "can you help? I promised a friend I would meet him an hour ago, but I don't know where I am." The woman looked up and she replied, "You are in a hot air balloon, hovering approximately 30 feet above the ground. You are between 41 and 40 degrees north latitude and between 59 and 60 degrees west longitude. You must be an engineer," said the balloonist. "I am," said the woman, "but how can you tell?" "Well," said the balloonist, "everything you told me is technically correct, but I have no idea what to make of your information. And the fact is, I am still lost. Frankly, you have been no help to me." "Well," said the woman, "you must be an administrator." You don't know where you're going. You have risen to where you are due to a great quantity of hot air. You have made a promise you have no idea how to keep, and you expect people beneath you to solve your problems. The fact is, you are in exactly the same place before we met, but now, somehow, it's my fault. I think my mother could relate to that story. As a junior high school teacher, she had a healthy disdain for what she called central administrators. Now, I had, in fact, become one. First a provost, and then a chancellor. Until she died, she never stopped asking me if I was practicing my music, and then expressing utter disapproval when I said I didn't have time. I don't think she thought I could possibly be doing anything constructive as a college administrator. Notwithstanding that cynicism about administrators, shared by many teachers, I think, I do believe that the top leadership of an institution, be it a university, a middle school, or a high school, can have a major impact on the culture of that institution for better or for worse. The lessons from my teachers and from my mother stayed with me as I rose through the ranks. I never forgot where I came from, a very modest middle-class background. And if there is one accomplishment that gives me the greatest sense of fulfillment from my time as the UNC Chancellor, it is the creation of the Carolina Covenant, the program that promises to low-income students from Carolina that they can graduate from this university debt-free. But the covenant, wonderful as it is, doesn't fully cover students from middle-class families who still need the aid of student loans. That is the very issue that President Obama came to address here just a few weeks ago. And that is the point that Dominique Garland made when she introduced the President. Dominique is from Greensboro, and she is graduating today with a degree in elementary education with plans to earn a master's degree at Columbia University. Where are you, Dominique? I want to recognize you. You did a great job in introducing the President. The point of Dominique's presentation was that while she has a manageable level of student debt, she's worried about her own sister, who's about to enter college next year. Will she have the same opportunities that Dominique has had? Will she be able to afford to enter a critical area of national service, such as teaching, with a mountain of debt load? The way we answer that question and others like it will shape our future as a nation. There's a famous quotation from John Adams, the second President of the United States, that ought to be inscribed in every school in America. And this is what Adams said. It's perhaps his most famous quotation outside of politics itself. "I must study politics and war that my sons may have liberty to study mathematics and philosophy, commerce and agriculture, in order to give their children a right to study painting, poetry, music, and architecture." You can appreciate that I love that quote because of the high position that Adams gives the arts. I love this hierarchy of learning. These words present, I think, a holistic view of the role of the teacher, of education in general, in the shaping of a civil society, in creating the educated electorate that the Founding Fathers envisioned. However, I think if we are honest with ourselves, we would have to say that we have not advanced very far above the first tier of Adam's pyramid. We are still trapped in the study of politics and war, and we are doing very poorly with Adam's second tier of learning, what today we call STEM: science, technology, engineering, and math. Marian Wright Edelman, the founder and president of the Children's Defense Fund, makes a compelling argument that we must have a fundamental change of course for the United States to become a more just society in the future. This is what she writes, and I quote, "Despite unprecedented material wealth in the United States, we allow nearly 13 million children to live in poverty and 9 million to go without health insurance. The majority of these children live in working families. The United States leads the world in health technology, but lags behind most of the industrialized world in infant mortality and low birth weight rates, children killed by guns, and the gap between rich and poor." She goes on, "How do we build the spiritual and political will to use our extraordinary resources to shape a more just society? At home, and peaceful rather than war-torn tomorrow in our world? How do we change the unbearable dissonance between promise and performance, between good politics and good policy, between professed and practiced human and family values, between racial and religious creed and racial and religious deed, between calls for community and rampant individualism and greed, and our capacity to prevent and alleviate human deprivation and disease, and our political and spiritual will to do so." She goes, and this is her final statement, "We must reset our moral compass if we are to build a world fit for our children over the next 50 years, and if humankind is to progress rather than regress." That's the end of her quote. So clearly, we have the knowledge, but do we have the will? There's one graduate today, I think, who does. Her name is Elaine Townsend, a graduate in middle grades education. Elaine has won a Fulbright grant to teach English in Korea. That's really outstanding, but what really impresses me about Elaine is her work as the co-director of the Scholars Latino Initiative, or SLI, a program in which UNC students take a one-to-one mentoring relationships with Latino students from low-wealth high schools to prepare them for college. She graduates tomorrow as a Walter Buckley Public Service Scholar. Elaine, would you please stand and let us recognize you? My hope for you today is that you will leave Carolina with more than the science of your craft. I hope that this university has imparted to you some of her values as a servant of society, that you will feel a responsibility to be a part of the necessary course change that Edelman talks about if we are to become a more just, a more civil, a more compassionate society. In 2005, Steve Jobs gave the commencement address at Stanford University. He was then in remission from the cancer that had been diagnosed only a year earlier, and he was, for that moment, in good health. And while he was in that health, he was still acutely conscious of his own mortality. And that was his context, and these were his words, his parting words to the Stanford graduates. Quote, "Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma. which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most importantly, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary. I can't say it better than that. Follow your heart. Study war no more. And never, ever give up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chancellor Moeser.